I gave this company my best years, and they gave me humiliation in return. That's how it felt standing there, in a room full of people clapping for a man they thought was being honored, not executed. The banner behind me said, "Congratulations on your retirement, Mark," in bold blue letters. Someone from HR had ordered cupcakes with my name written in white icing. For a moment, I believed the applause was genuine. I smiled, thanked everyone, raised my glass, and talked about gratitude. About how this company had been more than a workplace. About late nights, deadlines, friendships that had lasted decades. The usual stuff people say when they're trying not to cry at their own ending. Halfway through, I noticed my boss, Eric, standing in the back, arms folded, no smile. He was young, barely 40, the kind of executive who talks in numbers and doesn't blink when he fires someone. I'd trained his first supervisor when he was still in college. He used to ask me for advice. Lately, he wouldn't even look me in the eye. When I finished my little speech, he stepped forward and took the microphone. "Before we continue," he said, "I need everyone's attention." The room quieted. I thought he was going to thank me. Instead, he sighed. One of those exaggerated, theatrical sighs that's meant to set the tone. "It's unfortunate," he began, "that a moment meant to celebrate trust and loyalty should be overshadowed by something else." I felt every heartbeat in my chest. He turned to me, face perfectly blank. "Mark, as of today, your retirement is effective immediately. You're to pack your desk and leave the premises before the end of the day." The air went still. Laughter died mid-breath. Someone dropped a fork. I thought I'd misheard him. "Excuse me?" He didn't hesitate. "Stop smiling. Pack your desk and get out now." My throat went dry. The room started spinning, not fast, just enough to tilt the world. My coworkers looked between us like they were watching a car crash they couldn't look away from. I saw confusion, pity, fear. Not one person moved. I set my glass down on the table. The sound it made was louder than I expected. "What's this about?" I asked quietly. "Security will explain the details," Eric said, voice clipped. "Let's just say, a breach of trust. We'll handle it internally." The words hung in the air like smoke. A breach of trust. That phrase doesn't mean anything specific, but it sounds dirty enough to make people believe you did something. I could have shouted. I could have defended myself. Instead, I just stared at him, studying his face, calm, smug, prepared. He'd planned this. He wanted the scene. So I gave him something worse than anger. I gave him silence. I straightened my jacket, looked around the room, at the colleagues I'd mentored, the interns who'd learned from me, the managers who'd once trusted my word, and I said, "Thank you for the party." Then I walked out. No handshake. No goodbye. Just the sound of my own shoes crossing the tile floor. Security met me by my office. Two men, polite but firm. They handed me a box, stood by the door while I packed. Every photo frame, every worn-out notebook, every little piece of a life built over 38 years went into that cardboard box. I took my coffee mug last, the one with the faded company logo, and placed it gently on top. When I turned around, one of the guards said, "Sorry, sir." I nodded. "Don't be. It's just a job." But it wasn't just a job. It was 40 years of loyalty, of missed dinners, of weekends spent in server rooms, of raising a family on paychecks I earned by doing everything right. I walked past the front desk, through the glass doors, into the parking lot. The air smelled like rain. I set the box on the hood of my car and just stood there. Inside the building, they were probably already gossiping. Maybe Eric was spinning the story, talking about policy violations and unfortunate circumstances. I could almost hear it. And yet, under all that humiliation, there was something else. A small, clear sound in the back of my mind, like a key turning in a lock. I wasn't done. He thought he'd ended my story with a single line. But the truth was, he'd just given me the best opening I could ever ask for. But that was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. You don't sleep after something like that. You replay it, frame by frame. The sound of people clapping, The look on Eric's face when he said, breach of trust. The way nobody, not one person, stood up for me. I'd spent decades keeping that company together, mentoring half of the team that now couldn't even meet my eyes. By sunrise, the anger had cooled into something colder. Not fire. Ice. My wife, Linda, found me at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold. "Mark," she said softly, "what happened?" I told her everything. The party, the words, the look. She didn't interrupt, just listened, her fingers pressed against her lips. When I finished, she said, "You'll fight this, right?" I shook my head. "Not yet?" Because fighting means playing their game, and Eric was counting on that. He wanted me loud, defensive, desperate. He wanted to bury me under the word disgraced. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. The next day, HR sent me a bland email, effective termination upon retirement, full of legal phrasing that made betrayal sound professional. Attached was a confidentiality clause about data protection. It said I couldn't discuss the incident with anyone or I'd forfeit my severance. I read it 3 times. They'd built this trap weeks in advance. Then I noticed something, a reference line at the bottom of the email, internal review. A73, ledger. That wasn't a disciplinary code. It was a project tag. My project. The financial database I'd managed for 8 years. So that's what this was. Not about me, about something I saw. Eric wasn't cleaning house. He was covering tracks. Over the next few days, I started connecting dots. 3 months earlier, I'd flagged an irregular transfer in the quarterly report, a 7-figure discrepancy hidden in development costs. I'd sent it to Eric, assuming it was a misfile. He replied once, "Thanks, Mark, I'll handle it." Then nothing. A week later, my system permissions started changing. Access revoked here, limited there. At the time, I thought it was part of the new management structure. I was wrong. It was a lockdown. They'd built the accusation before I even retired. Linda wanted me to see a lawyer. I said, "No lawyers yet, not until I know the whole thing." So I started digging, carefully. I still had my old backup drive, a habit from years of being the guy who fixed things when everyone else panicked. I plugged it in. There they were, archived copies of financial reports, time-stamped emails, metadata. Every number told a story, and this one was ugly. Eric had restructured payments through a dummy subcontractor. Money meant for infrastructure was funneled into consulting invoices. Invoices approved under my project name. In other words, he'd used my signature. The realization hit like a punch to the ribs. He'd framed me using my own work. That's when the anger finally found a pulse. I didn't break anything. I didn't scream. I just closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and thought, "All right, you wanted me quiet. Let's see how quiet feels when it's aimed at you." I started small. I contacted an old friend in accounting, Rob, the kind of man who pretends not to hear things until he can't unhear them. "Off the record," I said, "have they started another audit?" He hesitated. Then, "Internal review, yes? Supposed to be routine. But they're only asking questions about your access logs." That told me everything. Eric wanted the official story set. Mark was careless. Mark caused the breach. Mark's retirement was accelerated. He was writing his version of history. So I began writing mine. That weekend I organized everything, every document, every transaction, every email chain. No anger, no rush. Just precision. 40 years of discipline turning into purpose. I wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. I was planning clarity. Monday morning, Eric called me. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't contact anyone from the company," he said, his voice full of fake calm. "Let's make this transition smooth." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Smooth, of course." He paused. "You're not going to make this messy, are you, Mark?" I said. "Eric, messy's your department." And hung up. That's when I knew he was nervous. A guilty man always calls to make sure you're quiet. I spent the next few days revisiting old drives, old backups, even physical files in my garage. I found something I hadn't remembered saving. a routine system log from 6 months ago, showing direct admin access from Eric's terminal at 2:14 a.m. under my username. He'd logged in remotely to my account. Sloppy, but fatal. When I saw it, I actually laughed. Not loud, not crazy, just this dry, humorless laugh that came from somewhere deep. It wasn't just proof, it was insurance. That night, I poured myself a whiskey, sat on the back porch, and thought about every birthday I'd missed because of work. Every time I'd stayed late fixing someone else's mistake. They thought I was old, disposable, harmless. They were wrong about all three, and though I didn't know it yet, that decision, to stay silent, to watch instead of react, would cost them everything. They thought I'd crawl away quietly. That's the mistake people like Eric always make. They confuse silence with surrender. A week passed before I did anything that could be called a move. I spent that time cleaning my garage, organizing files, pretending I was retired. I mowed the lawn, fixed a loose stair rail, took Linda out for dinner. I looked like a man letting go. But every night, when the house went quiet, I worked. I didn't need to hack anything. I already had everything. Eric had used my credentials to authorize 3 shell transfers from our infrastructure budget, a neat $3.4 million in total. Each payment routed through a consulting firm registered to a Delaware address with no website, no staff, and a phone number that went straight to voicemail. I looked it up. The owner on paper, E.J. Holdings, LLC. E for Eric. J for his middle name, James. Subtle as a brick. I cross-checked timestamps. His remote logins, the invoices, the approvals, everything aligned too perfectly. If I'd handed this to the board straight away, it would have looked like a revenge play. They'd bury it. But if I waited, if I gave it to the right people, it would become a matter of public record. So I made copies, printed the logs, encrypted the drive, labeled everything with dates and notes. Years of system management teach you one thing. The power isn't in the data itself. It's in the trail. Then I started setting the dominoes. Step 1 was to call an old client, a contractor turned compliance officer. We hadn't talked in 5 years, but I remembered how she used to complain about audit delays. "Allison," I said, "I think your department's about to get a very interesting email." "From who?" she asked. "From a ghost," I said, and hung up. That night, the email went out, anonymously. A zipped folder, a short message. Potential conflict of interest involving executive-level financial conduct at Dannertech. For audit integrity, please verify Project A73 ledger transactions. No accusations, no signatures, just breadcrumbs. By the next morning, the whispers had started. I knew because my phone buzzed twice. 2 texts from old coworkers. "Hey, something's up. Finance is on lockdown. They're saying there's a review. You didn't hear this from me." I didn't reply. I just smiled. Within a week, the company issued a statement. An internal review is underway regarding certain irregularities. It was buried in small text on the investor page, but the kind of people who read those pages, they notice everything. By Friday, Dannertech's stock had dropped 6%. Eric went dark, but I wasn't done. I'd spent nearly 4 decades learning how systems break. Not computers, people. People break in patterns. So I tested the cracks. I forwarded a single document, one of Eric's fake invoices, to a local business journalist. No commentary, no threats. Just the document and one line. You might want to check the signatory. It took 3 days for the story to appear online. Dannertech faces audit amid financial anomalies. 3 paragraphs long. No names yet, but inside the company it detonated like a bomb. Rob called me that night. "Whatever you did," he said, "you just turned the whole place upside down. Eric's been in meetings all day. People are saying legal's involved." "Legal usually arrives right before the end," I told him. He laughed nervously. "You always were the calm one." "Not calm," I said. "Prepared." The next week I walked by the office building. Just walked by, no reason to go in. Through the glass, I saw tension everywhere. Security guards, boxes, HR walking fast. Eric's car wasn't in the lot. I stopped at the curb and looked up at the windows. For 38 years, that building had been my second home. I thought I'd feel grief. I didn't. I felt something cleaner. Balance. That night, I took Linda to dinner again. She noticed something different in me. "You're lighter," she said. "I'm finished carrying other people's weight," I told her. But inside, I knew the storm wasn't done. There's always one last gust. 3 days later, Eric called me from a private number. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. "Mark," he started, his voice tight, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't helping anyone." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm retired, remember?" "Don't play games with me," he snapped. "The audit? The leaks? You think I don't know where this came from? Then you should probably prepare your statement," I said evenly. "You're destroying the company." "I didn't destroy it, Eric. I just stopped holding it up." He went quiet, then softer. "If you come forward now, we can work something out. Protect your pension, keep your reputation intact." I almost laughed. "You already took that from me at my retirement party, remember?" Silence again. I could hear him breathing, heavy, unsteady. Then he said, "You'll regret this." "No," I told him. "I think you will." And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because 2 days later, the audit became public. The journalist released a follow-up naming the executive under investigation. Eric James Morrow, CEO of Dannertech. The company suspended him pending review. I watched the news from my living room, coffee in hand. Same cup I'd used at the office for 20 years. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat. Just nodded once. They thought I was done. I wasn't. Peace doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It just shows up one morning when there's nothing left to fix. The story hit national press by the end of the month. Dannertech CEO resigns amid financial investigation. They printed Eric's photo, the one with his perfect smile and expensive watch, right next to a line that read, "Refused to comment." Inside the company, chaos turned to silence. Half the board quit. The stock dipped again. The new interim CEO released a statement about transparency and values. Corporate poetry for "we're trying not to drown." I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't need to. They reached out to me. Old colleagues, the same ones who had looked away at that party, now sending me messages. "Mark, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. You were right. He used us too. I read every message, responded to none. Some things don't need replies. Silence answers better." One afternoon, Rob called. "You watching the news?" he asked. "Not really." "They raided his house. Federal audit. They're saying embezzlement." I leaned back in my chair, watching the late sunlight spill through the blinds. "Good," I said quietly. "Maybe they'll find what he thought he buried." There was a long pause. "You really planned this, didn't you?" "I planned nothing," I said. "I just kept the receipts." He laughed once, low and nervous. "You're a dangerous man when you're calm." "I was always calm, Rob. You just didn't notice until now." After that, things got quiet again, the kind of quiet I'd been waiting for. Days filled with small things. Coffee with Linda, fixing the fence, walking by the lake. Retirement, the way it should have been. Sometimes I'd pass the old office building. The banner was gone. The glass doors still reflected the sky, but now they looked like a mirror that no longer knew me. I didn't feel bitterness, just distance. Linda said one night, "You could write about it." Maybe it'd help. I smiled. Maybe. So I did. I sat down one evening, opened Reddit, a place my daughter once told me about, and started typing. At my retirement party, my boss told me to stop smiling, pack my desk, and get out. So I did. Then I kept going. I wrote about the silence, the accusations, the long nights staring at numbers until they told the truth. I didn't name names. I didn't gloat. I just told the story of a man who gave everything to a company. and what happened when the company decided he was expendable. The post blew up. Thousands of comments. Some angry, some grateful. People sharing their own stories. How they'd been humiliated, discarded, underestimated. One comment said, "This is the most satisfying revenge story I've ever read." Another said, "You didn't just get even, you got peace." That one stuck with me, because they were right. What I wanted wasn't revenge, it was balance. A week later, an envelope came in the mail from Danertek's new legal team. Inside was a check, back pay and full pension, adjusted for wrongful termination. No apology letter, just numbers. Numbers always tell the truth. Linda asked, "Are you going to cash it?" I looked at the check for a long time, then set it in a drawer. "Not yet," I said. "It's not about the money." That evening we drove to the coast, 2 hours west, where the ocean starts to smell like salt and freedom. We found a small cafe overlooking the water. I ordered coffee. She ordered tea. The sunset painted the horizon in gold. I watched it in silence. "You look content," she said. "I am," I replied. "For the first time in years, everything I have is mine." We sat there until the light faded. I checked my phone once. No notifications, no emails, no missed calls. Just quiet. Later that night, back at home, I put my old work badge in a box in the closet. Not as a trophy, as a reminder that sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the last, strongest move left. The next morning, I opened Reddit again. Hundreds of new comments. One caught my eye. "What happened to your boss?" I typed slowly. "He got what he earned, and I got what I deserved. Peace." Then I closed the laptop, made myself coffee, and sat by the window. The world outside didn't care about promotions, deadlines, or titles. It just kept moving, like it always had. I'd spent years believing that loyalty meant staying no matter what. Now I knew the truth. Loyalty only works when it goes both ways. I still think about that party sometimes. The lights, the laughter, the moment he told me to stop smiling. If I could go back, I'd still smile, because that was the moment I stopped belonging to them and started belonging to myself. Now, when people ask how retirement's going, I tell them the truth. It's quiet, and I've never been richer.